Nikhil Hira, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you today. Nikhil, you're the tax leader for East Africa, and obviously we've known each other a long time, so it really is a pleasure.
It's nice to be here, Ali Khan. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Nikhil, can you just, talk us through the landscape, the tax landscape in East Africa? I mean, what, big picture, what's going on, what are the challenges?
I think, Ali Khan, all the countries in East Africa today have got the same pressures, where they've got soaring government expenditure, which is not necessarily in control, and they've got revenue that is not keeping pace.
Yes.
So we've got deficits that are expanding year by year. And if you look at these countries, every year their budget is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and the economy is not keeping pace. That said, of course, the economies have the potential to keep pace, and no doubt they will as we go along. And given where we are in the global economy, we're still doing very well. But the issue with this gap that we've got between revenue and expenditure is that the revenue authorities are under such pressure to collect that they're chasing everything they can possibly chase,
Yes.
and indeed chasing things which may not be chaseable.
Yes.
So we're spending a lot of time defending our clients against assessments that mean nothing, spending our time before tribunals, and that to me is not the right way for me to be spending my time and my team to be spending their time. We should be looking more at the tax policy, helping our clients plan their affairs, and yet we're arguing constantly.
So what are you saying, that there's a very narrow group of taxpayers and that these guys are being squeezed continuously?
And that has been happening for a number of years.
Yes.
I've said, as long as we've known each other, I've been saying we have to widen our nets.
Yes.
The Juakali sector, or the informal sector, whatever you want to call it, is much, much bigger than the formal sector. And with that, the same taxpayers are being attacked over and over again. We have in Kenya, we have a tax base of 2 and 3 million people.
That's it. Population of 44 million.
Yeah, so it's not a big tax base, and we have a lot of cash industries, matatus, kiosks on the side of the road, etc., which are not being caught.
But it seemed like a theme of the budget that I saw here, Tanzania and in Uganda, which was to actually now target the informal component of the economy. Can you just talk us through what?
Indeed, we have to do that. We have to target the informal sector, because otherwise we're not going to be able to widen our net. So how do we do it? Well, Kenya said we're going to consider putting back a presumptive income tax,
Yes.
which is basically a type of withholding certain types of income. You deduct the tax at source when you're buying, and off you go and remit it to the revenue. Now, this needs to be worked on. Uganda and Tanzania do have a system. We used to have one in Kenya. They've taken it. It was only for agriculture, the agricultural industry. We need to fine-tune it, and I hope it doesn't take them too long to fine-tune it, because I've seen a number of measures in the Kenyan budget which we saw last year, the year before that, and only now are they starting to implement them.
So you're saying there's a lag effect?
There's a big lag effect, a very big lag effect. And there's that sense, certainly in Kenya, I'm seeing that sense of deja vu. I heard a number of the measures that Mr. Rotich announced on Wednesday. I heard 5 years ago when President Kenyatta was the finance minister. So you can see the party line going forward there.
Yes.
What I heard in Tanzania, though, was a lot of protectionist measures.
Yes.
Mr. Magufuli is determined.
Tell me about that. Yes.
He's determined to protect his economy. The danger is that he becomes over-protectionist.
So how do they implement protectionist measures?
Well,
in the Tanzanian budget?
they do it by increasing import duties on things that can be manufactured in Kenya, but in Tanzania, but are being imported. Indeed, Kenya has done the same: steel, iron, aluminium. In fact, both Tanzania and Uganda did aluminium. So what they're trying to do is to protect their own industries,
Yes.
which makes sense, because we've got a big youth bulge in this part of the world. We have to employ these people, and if we're going to rely on imports, then it's clearly not going to work going forward. So efforts are being made.
Yes.
It's slow. Some of us would like to see it happening quick. And I think it's just the nature of the beast. It's just not happening that quickly.
So if you were sitting in the government's shoes, Nikhil, what would you be proposing?
On the tax front,
Yes.
I've always felt that, firstly, lower rates means more tax.
Yes.
We've seen that in many parts of the world. We saw it in Kenya.
Yes.
In the 90s, we had personal tax rates, top rate was 65%. And on top of that, there was an investment income surcharge taking you up to 83 effectively.
Wow.
That went down to 30, I think it came down 45, then down to 30. And if you look at what happened 93, 94, 95, 96, it's an upward spiral. It just exponentially jumped,
Yes.
the collections, because tax rates came down. It made more sense to comply than to pay penalties and go to committee prison. So what we should be doing is focusing on our direct tax rates. I've always said don't tax earnings because it becomes a disincentive to earn. Tax spending, I have the choice as to what I will spend. So how do you tax spending? VAT, excise duty, that's the way to do it. But what we must be very careful about, and this is where I think we went wrong in our own VAT Act, was we started taxing basic food commodities that the Mwananchi rely on.
Yes.
So when you start taxing milk, although that was changed, when you start taxing milk, what happens? I can still buy my milk. It's a struggle for me also.
Yes.
But your maid, your security man, your driver, he's struggling.
But what about the argument that there have been so many exemptions that I think it was yesterday at the Deloitte chat that somebody was saying, but there are so many exemptions, for example, sugar at times, all kinds. Is that regime working?
The reason we went to a new VAT Act was that we had about 380 or 90 exempt items in the old Act, and we had just over 400 zero-rated items, which is where the refund problem came from. So the idea was that we take these out. What we did was we went from the extreme of that 800, 900 to almost nothing. And in the process, we took into the tax net things that shouldn't really have been in the tax net in the first place. Now what is happening since 2013 is that people are saying, no, but this shouldn't have been there in the first place. Can you please take it out and put it into the exempt or put it into the zero rated? So when we got the new act, there were, I think, 15 or 20 zero rated items. When I looked at the finance bill today, I think we're now up at 69 or something like that. So we're going back to where we were, which defeats the whole object of having changed the law in the first place. So that's something that we've got to look very carefully at.
Just staying with VAT, a lot of companies that I speak to are complaining and saying actually they're giving a free loan to the government because VAT repayments have been so slow. Is that correct? What's the situation now?
One of the problems we had in the old VAT Act was, bear in mind, you can only get a refund of VAT or be eligible for a refund if you are supplying zero-rated items. So primarily that'll be exporters, which makes sense because VAT is a domestic consumption tax. If you're exporting the goods, it's not being consumed in Kenya, why do you pay Kenyan VAT? Makes a lot of sense. We had a number of other things that were zero-rated as well. Newspapers, medicines, various things. So all these suppliers were in refund. And then in the mid-2000s, the KRA introduced this concept of withholding VAT, where they said, when I bill you, you will be required, because you're a withholding VAT agent, you will be required to withhold the VAT that instead of paying it to me, you'll pay it to the Revenue Authority and you'll give me a certificate to say you've done it. Meanwhile, I've also paid it. So in the short term, the KRA got a double payment of VAT.
Wow.
And everyone forgot that that had to be refunded. So our refunds went up, and today I think they're sitting in the region of about 30 billion shillings.
Yes.
There was, a few weeks ago, I think the Cabinet Secretary said, I'm going to make the refunds. Now, I've heard this since 2008. I heard President Kibaki saying it. I heard President Kenyatta saying it when he was in the Ministry of Finance. I heard his successor and I even heard Mr. Rotich saying it. I heard the Commissioner General saying it. It's not happening. And what is happening is that we've got huge amounts of money stuck with the government on which we're earning no interest.
Yes.
And then we're going out and borrowing at fairly high rates of interest.
Yes.
So we're financing the government, and that is exactly where these people are coming from.
You deal with all the big companies in this region. We can name so many of them, the big multinationals. How do they view the East African environment from a policy-making point of view, from an investment opportunity? Are people positive? Are they negative? Where on the continuum is everybody?
I think this has become an investor's paradise in a sense.
Yes.
People want to invest here, and as we said at the beginning, and you said yesterday at the Deloitte chat, if we look at the global economy, East Africa is bucking the trend completely. Global economy at just over 3%, East Africa averaging around about 5.5, 6. So, and even higher than the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria, South Africa, complete shambles. So, as an investment destination, everyone is very keen. When they get here, is it easy to do business?
Yes, that's my next question.
And that is where we're failing.
Yes.
Look at the World Bank ease of doing business. We've been in the bottom quartile for many, many years.
Aidan will argue that we've improved considerably in the last 12 to 18 months.
There has been improvement. I'm not denying that there hasn't. There's been a lot of improvement. We still have a very long way to go. Do you know the average business today will probably pay tax a minimum of 65 times a year? 5 for the corporation tax, 12 PAYE payments, 12 NSSF, 12 NHIF, 12 VAT, 12 withholding tax. I haven't talked about county levies. I haven't talked about if you're importing and you've got excisable goods. So this could easily go up to 100, which is a significant amount of payment to make.
What is an optimal scenario there then in a dividend?
I think, things like PAYE, NHIF, NSSF, we can put them together. And I know Aidan actually said that there's a plan afoot to do that. Problem is, NSSF have their own number, NHIF has their own number, and KRA has a PIN number. If the three don't match, we're not getting anywhere. iTax, the new system that we've got, is certainly making it easier. And while I don't use it myself for my clients, I've used it for my wife's business. And it is much simpler to use once you get into it. And I think for me, I've been a great proponent of the system. There are a few bugs that have to be ironed out. Once they're ironed out, there's nothing like a system where I can go in and see my entire tax history on one page and immediately catch on, guys, you haven't recorded this payment I made, or you've allocated this payment wrong, or things like that. Because one of the problems we have today, I'm still getting statements of account myself personally,
Yes.
going back 10 years saying you haven't paid tax. And every 6 months I send the same letter back and say, here's the evidence. But the old system is not being updated. And I've even suggested to the KRA
Yes.
that, in 98, when the government first allocated money for VAT refunds, I was the one who agreed with the KRA and the Institute that external auditors could audit the refunds. I came up with the work program and everything. And I've said, clearing these statements of account, I'm sure my clients will be happy to pay me. So let me do it. You give us access to your system on a case-by-case basis. We'll update the system, because right now you've got data in there that makes you think you're flush.
Yes.
And the reality is that none of that is, 99% of it is not due.
Wow.
So you're telling the Treasury, oh, I've got loads of money to come in.
Yes.
Reality is it's not there.
How interesting. Staying with that theme where we were describing how East Africa is attractive, but then you're saying, when you start the businesses, what other challenges are businesses finding, would you say?
We talked about the tax system.
Yes.
Tax policy, big problem. It's not where it should be. I gave you the example earlier of a measure that was announced 2 years ago, and it's only now being implemented and all it needed was one page of rules. It's not a big deal. It could be done, could have worked, it would have gone forward. So our tax policy is become very short term because we're so desperate for funds. We're introducing excise duty on everything, excise duty on bank charges. What are we achieving?
Yes.
$1 billion, $1.5 billion shillings in a budget of 2.26 trillion. It's a drop in the ocean.
Yes.
And all it does is make it more difficult for people to do business and more costly. Our infrastructure is not where it should be, but I've got to give the government credit. We're now focusing on it. We are probably 25 years too late, but we're doing it.
Yes.
I mean, in the last 3 years, 615 megawatt more of power,
Yes.
more roads around Nairobi.
Yeah.
Things are improving. It's going to take a while, but they're improving, and we'll see the benefit in the future. But what we're not seeing any effort being made, to my mind, to solve is this corruption issue.
Yes.
If we don't
Is
knock
that the
that on
elephant
the
in the room
head,
for
it is
you?
the big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
We've got to knock it on the head. And what we've got to do is we've got a whole, I mean, I read somewhere that the EACC has given some 300 and something cases for prosecution. I haven't seen any being prosecuted yet. Forget convictions, they haven't even gone into court yet. It seems to me you need to do 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe of these high profile things, convict, imprison, get your money back, and that will then give the message. Give the message.
Yes.
Okay, we're making attempts with this amnesty that has just been announced.
Well,
bring
tell
your
us
money
about
back.
that, because it was interesting when you said, does it mean that any kind of ill-gotten gains can be returned?
Yes, absolutely. That's my reading of the budget speech. I haven't had
It's
a
a
chance to
blanket
read it.
amnesty.
It's a blanket amnesty. Bring your money back.
And what must have informed that? Liquidity, bring some cash back?
Liquidity, you bring the cash back, it comes and then it starts circulating in this economy. You generate taxable income around it. I remember in the 90s, we always used to say, if some of these politicians were to bring back 10% of the ill-gotten gains, we wouldn't have a deficit. That may have been an exaggeration, but we said it. And I think if this money comes back and starts circulating in our economy, because today money is not circulating in the economy.
You feel that as well?
I feel that a lot of our GDP growth is because of the infrastructure development, but it's all going to go out of the country. It's not going to stay here. It's Chinese funded, Chinese manufacturers, Chinese workers even, a few of our workers. So there's not a lot trickling down. Even the need for local content has not necessarily been abided by. So as I said, the benefit of infrastructure will come later. But therefore there's no money circulating in the market. So let's bring back the stuff. There are going to be, we're going to have to see some detailed rules around it. As I mentioned yesterday, if in Kenya you're only taxed on Kenyan source income. So if you've got rental income in the UK, it's not taxable in Kenya. So why would you then sell a property that you bought with ill-gotten gains and bring it back? But beware. The whole world is changing as far as taxes. It's a global tax reset.
Yes, tell me a bit about that.
There's a lot more talking between authorities at the basic level. So if I've got something somewhere else, that authority may talk to this authority here and say, oh, Hira's got a lot of money out there. And then the question will come to me, where'd you get it from? You've got to then explain the source and that it was taxed, etc. But the global tax reset really came about from this concern that people were using tax planning schemes, perfectly legal I might add, to minimize their tax liabilities. And I'm a firm believer, given what I do.
But surely, if you have some rules, the fact that you're applying, you're reacting to the rules in an intelligent manner, you shouldn't be punished for that.
You shouldn't be punished for it. That's my view. But I guess what is happening is now there's the moral question. That you're earning stacks of money in my jurisdiction as a citizen. You're earning, I'm a citizen of a jurisdiction, you're coming in and earning stacks but not paying any tax. So what's the benefit for me? And I think morally people are saying that it's not right.
So are you seeing a reset? You called it a reset. Tell me how that reset is happening.
What is going to happen is that the OECD came up with 15 action points. Kenya, I think, has signed up to a few of them, not all of them yet. Most of the Western countries have signed up to most of them. And as part of this, you're going to see more talking between authorities. You're going to see more, it comes from what is known as BEPS, so Business Erosion Profits Sharing. So it's taking your business profits and taking it to another jurisdiction. Basic transfer pricing. You take it from a high jurisdiction to a low jurisdiction. So that's why people go and park money in Panama or the BVIs and places like that. All they're saying is, no, if you're doing business in my country, you must pay your fair share of tax in my country. And from a moral perspective, some of the big multinationals, the Googles, the Amazons, the Apples, etc., have agreed to that, Starbucks, etc. There's a big thing called the Google tax in the UK. They've agreed that morally they should do it. We may or may not agree with that. Of course, from my perspective as a tax consultant, I find that I may have no work left if this continues.
No, of course.
It's an issue.
And you're very skilled at what you do.
Thank you.
And have a very successful practice at Deloitte. So from a global thing, you're seeing the landscape changing globally, and are you seeing this sort of international, is there conformity between here, East Africa, and this new international norm you're describing? Is it diverging? Well, how would you say?
There is definitely conformity in some areas.
Yes.
As I said, these 15 action points, Kenya has signed up to some of them. Others are probably not relevant to us just yet, or perhaps we don't have the systems in place to deal with them. The reality is that we're all going to sign up to it. We have signed more tax information exchange agreements in the last 3 years than we've probably done in our entire 50 years of independence. And they're starting to work. For even in our little East African region, the revenue authorities are meeting quarterly, monthly. They're talking. They're saying Ali Khan Sachi has got money here and he's got money there. Why? Where's it coming from? How are we going to deal with it? And transfer pricing has become the big buzzword for the revenue authority.
Yes, here.
Here, Tanzania, Uganda,
Yes.
Rwanda. I do think that they're probably overestimating what they can collect.
Yeah.
They will get some. But I don't believe that these multinationals have come into this part of the world with the sole aim of evading tax. It doesn't make sense to me. And
reputationally now,
yes. And the tax rates, unless you're using a big tax haven,
Yes.
which fewer and fewer people are, the tax rate between here and the UK is not that significantly different. So if you're shifting profits for 2%, it doesn't make sense to do it. So I think we're going to see that getting squeezed. But what we forget, and this is something that I've pointed out all along, is that you can't just look at a set of accounts and say this company is not paying corporate tax.
Yes.
It may not be paying corporate tax because you've given them an incentive. We give incentives in Kenya. We give big investment deductions. So people could be in tax loss but accounting profit. But what we're forgetting is they're employing, they may be generating foreign exchange, they're paying collecting VAT, paying withholding tax, collecting excise duty. So the add-on economic benefit.
Do you think we don't appreciate that add-on multiplier effect? Because I found this complaint being made from a number of different businesses who are saying, no one's really measuring the value, the economic value.
If you look at some of these things that come online,
Yes.
Saying that multinationals are out to diddle Africans, they only talk about the corporate tax liability.
Yes.
Because they're looking at a set of accounts which may or may not give true picture of the pay-as-you-earn, the excise duty, the VAT that is being paid. And I think if you go underlying into it, you'll probably find that the economic benefit that these people are creating is huge. It takes a lot to invest in a big manufacturing plant. It takes a lot to invest in exploring for oil or
Yes.
producing oil. I mean, we've got a lot of rich people in Kenya, but we don't have that kind of money that can do those sort of activities. And we need these people. And I don't think most of them are not here to diddle us.
Yes.
But they're doing what they should do, which is tax as an expense for them.
Yes.
So they're minimizing it. As long as they're doing it legally, I don't see a problem.
Can I finish off by asking, you've looked at this landscape up close and personal all these years. Do you feel optimistic
About the future?
about the future for the region? Yeah.
I've always said, in this country, we're a strategically important country for many parts of the world.
Yes.
We have a private sector that is extremely resilient
Yes.
and has gone through shock waves and what have you and come through the other end. We have a class of entrepreneurs that you don't see in many parts of the world. We have a good education system. We have a youth bulge, which can be both a positive and a negative. But to me, the future is optimistic. What worries me is we've got an election coming up.
Yes.
I still think that we've learnt our lesson. We're not going to go back into the
contestation, and we're a year away, Nikhil.
Yes, but that's, I think that happens every year.
Yes.
At the end of the day, I think we've become mature enough to realize that if we let the country go into violence and what have you, no one is going to benefit in the long run. So I'm very optimistic.
Nikhil, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ali Khan.
Thank you.